So morning, everyone. Really welcome to Marketing Manchester's partner event. This is about the reopening of tourism hospitality. I'm Shona Southern and I'm the MD of Marketing Manchester. And we're joined today by some fabulous speakers, top of their game. And if I just introduce those speakers today to you, we've got Patricia Yates, who's Director of Strategy at Visit Britain. We've got Kate Nichols, who's Chief Executive of UK Hospitality, Victoria Braddock, who is our Director of International Marketing at Marketing Manchester, and we're shortly to be joined also by Joanne Roney, who's Chief Exec here at Manchester City Council. So we've got a great lineup for you today. Just to set the scene, we'll be taking questions throughout the session, so please use the chat box, and I'll try and direct those questions to the relevant speakers. If I can't answer those questions today, I'll make sure that the team come back to you with some decent answers following the webinar. So just to set the scene, a few minutes before we hand over to the speakers. As we know, all areas of tourism hospitality are now open. Still some challenges though, 3 in particular. One is the pingdemic, or that's self-isolation and adapting to the challenges of that. We believe that they'll be lifted on the 16th of August. That's good news. The traffic light system still causing severe restrictions right across our inbound travel, but there's talks this week. The government, we think, will be announcing travellers to England from the EU and US will, if they've got 2 vaccinations, will be avoiding the 10-day self-isolation. So that's really great news. And then also staff shortages, which we've seen across the sector. I think in terms of that, we've seen higher wages in some areas. Is this the start of better wages for the sector and perhaps a more appealing sector? So that'd be interesting to hear from our speakers. So still challenges, but today is all about looking forward. It's about optimism, it's about recovery. And our speakers today will hopefully be able to share what their organisations are doing for the sector. So 3 areas really: promoting the UK as an attractive destination. So we're in the capable hands of Victoria Braddock and Patricia Yates today. So Visit Britain and Marketing Manchester, some great plans going ahead this year, and we'll hear about them. Local authorities, of course, across the land have been dealing with not only the vaccination programme and the pandemic, the grants, the business support, and trying getting towns and cities back up again. So Joanne will be able to share us with that. So in all of that, audience here today, our partners, our members, have had to deal with all of that. Businesses have had to adapt, be flexible, survive, deal with all of those issues. And now we're looking forward to regaining market share, regaining our customers back again, and getting back to work. So just to get us in the mood, we thought we'd start off with a brand new film Victoria's team has created, and it celebrates the tourism, hospitality and leisure sector in Greater Manchester. So we're just going to play that to get us all in the mood. So it's only a couple of minutes.
We're associated with football, our music, our culture, our nightlife, and I think we stand out more than any other city region in the whole of the UK about that.
I think people over the last year have realised how much the hospitality industry contributes to the entire economy. It attracts so much tourism.
Last time we did Manchester International Festival, there was around about a 50 million impact on the economy of the city. People around the world continue to see Manchester as a place where artists and creative people want to live and stay.
There's so many different organisations that want to lift queer artists up.
An event like Pride really shows how Manchester celebrates the LGBTQ+ community. It's amazing to see tens of thousands of supporters each year.
Tourism is a really important part of Greater Manchester's economy. Our ambition is strong, our diversity is strong, and it's still growing.
We feel we've been hugely successful here in Manchester, building awareness around the Dakota name, both locally with our UK-based guests as well as international travellers. And I do think that that's down to the tourism sector being so strong here in Manchester.
Conferences and business events provide significant value to Greater Manchester's economy, and that equates to £860 million a year. And that's in addition to another £430 million provided by delegates who come back with family and friends.
Retail plays a massive part as an employee here in Manchester. There's approximately 5,000 people that are employed in the retail sector. International spend is key to us. Pre-pandemic, that was worth 50 million just to retailers.
There's people are trying to do stuff here, and I think Manchester Council, they kind of want to encourage more independent businesses, which is really good.
Tourism is a significant economic driver for not only the city region but for the north of England, and that equates to £9 billion annually to the economy and supports 100,000 jobs for our residents. It underpins the quality of life, future investment, but also helps in place shaping. And we will continue with our ambitions to drive recovery and future sustainable growth.
Great, thanks for that film. I think it's just gets us in the mood. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Patricia Yates, who's Director of Strategy at Visit Britain, who's been very, very busy. You've probably seen her on television screens or heard her on the radio. So I'm going to hand over to Patricia now.
Thank you, Shona. And I've been asked to speak a bit about international travel and look in the crystal ball and say what we're doing to bring it back as quickly as possible. So we've been very clear that we expect a big dip in tourism revenues this year. I think, with all the great coverage of businesses open and up and running, we still need to make the case that many businesses haven't got reserves and cash flow because they've been shut for so long or they're opening with COVID restrictions. So for inbound tourism, we talked about a £6.2 billion spent by inbound tourists this year. That's a huge drop on the 28 billion that we would normally see. So still tough, and of course tough for cities that are really depend on those international visitors. The coast and countryside is picking up the domestic market, but we're really working hard to get domestic visitors back into the cities. That said, some really positive news this morning that speculation, which looks to me to have been briefed by Number 10, that we're going to see a lifting of restrictions on US and European visitors so that they will be able to come here without quarantine. That would be hugely important for us. I mean, the Americans, our most valuable market, are really desperate to get out and travel. We've seen that Europe has stolen a march on us in allowing Americans to start to travel. So it would be good to see Americans back. And Europeans, of course, it's easier to attract them. They can come more quickly, shorter timelines. Are used to coming to British cities, so would be good to see those American visitors back again. As I say, speculation, but it looks like fairly well-formed speculation. And we've got the cross-government meeting at 2:00, which would normally give us the heads up on what's going to happen. The other positive thing is that when we've been looking at sentiment in international markets, we can see that people do want to travel, and they want to travel this year. In spite of all the uncertainties, people are at the stage where they want to travel abroad, and particularly that slightly younger audience, the 18 to 34-year-olds. The older audience very much vaccine dependent, and that's really the top trigger for international travel. But the younger people desperate to come. So the barriers that still remain, well, the first one you have to talk about is government restrictions, and that goes both ways, doesn't it? So Australia, which was our fourth biggest inbound market, looks as if it's going to be shut for some time. China looks as if it's going to be shut. The US, although we're now talking about opening to US visitors, are still advising their citizens not to come, and they're still not allowing Brits to travel there. So that reciprocity of country barriers. It's not just us that has to open up. And I think, travelling with quarantine is really not a goer for international markets. And the worry is that we will have to learn to live with COVID. We will have to learn with new variants of concern opening up, and how will travel adapt? How will it keep people happy when travel is not quite the same as what we were used to? So how will consumers adapt and change their requirements in the light of COVID restrictions? So at the moment, we're using our owned and earned channels to stay in touch with consumers and trade partners, really to keep Britain front of mind. So that's using great content, using our social media, helping trade partners build itineraries for Britain, so that once we start spending money and rolling out international campaigns, that we're really focusing on conversion with those commercial partners and intermediaries, and we're harnessing the work that we've done in building that aspiration into just getting people to come. So in the first quarter of next year, we're looking at our key markets, getting them to plan a longer holiday for spring and summer. So working with the tour operators to get more bookable products across all our channels, and looking at the experiences that we have now and the opportunities for promotion next year. Of course, we've got the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, but we've also got the Festival of the UK, which I think is going to be amazing, but there's not a lot being said about it now. But the intention for that is it will be a huge global moment, and of course the Platinum Jubilee as well. Leisure travel, only part of the coin, winning back business events, and I know that's hugely important to Manchester. Just as important, even if we're talking about events that are going to come in 2 or 3 years, we have to be out there and bidding for business now. We know that business travellers are keen to return to travel for business. We've seen real life events back on stage in the US and being popular. So at the moment, we've got 2 funds out in market for people to bid for as part of the Business Events Growth Programme. So one of those is to support people bidding for international business events. And one of those is to look at business events that have already been won, and how can we boost international delegates and attendance. So from April 2019, we've supported 2 events financially and 6 events with government advocacy in the north of England. We've got 3 events in the pipeline for 2021-22 who are requesting support, and they're worth about 16.3 million in estimated delegate spend, much more in terms of economic impact. We've continued to run the Meet England shows virtually, but we are getting ready to get out in market. So IMEX America in November, IBTM in Barcelona in November, December, and IMEX Frankfurt in April 2022 this year. Well, government is very interested in business events at the moment. We're looking with them at building a golden list of events that Britain wants to bid for, so that we can really get cross-government support for that. And we're also looking at forging partnerships with associations and organisations that can connect us to meeting planners, so that we know what's coming up. We're out in market and bidding for the UK and bringing those bids home to destinations that can then pick them up and really nail them. So I think in summary, a bit of uncertainty around international travel, but probably looking more positive today than it has done for some time. So some green shoots there in consumer demand, and goodness, we might start to get borders open here.
Great, thanks, Patricia. And when do you think we'll hear from the government? There's rumblings it might be this week. What do you reckon?
It's always difficult to tell what hearing from the government means. I mean, those leaks last night look as if they were being briefed by Number 10. the cross-government group, which is what I sit on, hasn't been told yet. So we're having the talk at 2:00, and then I guess it will be when it's announced to Parliament, and then when it can go public. But the talk is that it might come quite quickly. That would be really good news. So we're obviously out supporting that.
Absolutely, we're right behind that. It's great news. Okay, thanks, Patricia. We'll come back with some of the questions later on. We're now going to go to one of our other speakers. So if I go to Kate, then Joanne, then Victoria. So Kate Nichols, Chief Exec of UK Hospitality, familiar face and voice across our UK media over the last year. Kate, over to you in terms of how do you think we've performed and what's looking positive in terms of the recovery?
Well, thank you, Shona. And just to start, I think that's a great film, Victoria. It was really brilliant to see. It gives that sense of optimism, hope, looking forward to all the things that we've missed about coming to Manchester and being in Manchester's cultural scene. And it sets it beautifully for me to be able to talk about why it's so important to continue to support our hospitality businesses as we reopen. So I've been asked to touch on three key things. The impact of COVID on the sector, the remaining sort of immediate issues and concerns that raises as we emerge from step 4. Secondly, to look at our priorities in UK hospitality for the next 6 months as we move from that reopening into recovery phase, and then look ahead towards the longer term, building resilience and how we get back to a sort of renaissance, which Patricia touched upon, which is really into next year. But how can we work more closely together as sort of national trade bodies, locally and regionally, as well as at the national level, to pick up on the longer term structural issues that we'll need to make sure we get that renaissance coming through, and particularly on the issue of staff. So first of all, just to touch on COVID. And I know that we're trying to look ahead at optimism, but it is very difficult to do any of these presentations without talking about the seismic impact of the last 18 months. And I think particularly in Manchester and Greater Manchester, where you've had the longest running restrictions, the longest running impact, that seismic impact of 18 months of yo-yo lockdowns, restrictions made worse by the delay in the step 4 of the reopening. To quote Marks and Spencer's, it's not just any months that we've lost in terms of that delay. These were critical months in June and July when we should have been rebuilding confidence that we missed it. But prior to the pandemic, hospitality and tourism in the UK, 11% of employment, 7% of GDP. We were the 3rd largest export earner. The spend in eating and drinking out by foreign visitors in our hospitality venues is bigger than all of our food and drink exports put together. And we have just, as Patricia's outlined, we've just wiped that out over the last 18 months effectively. And realistically, we're not going to see that coming back in any meaningful way this year. So emerging from the pandemic at step 4, our hospitality sector is a 1/3 the size it was pre-pandemic. So we've lost over £90 billion of revenue, 660,000 fewer workers in the sector, and disproportionately hit in the major cities and the major metropolitan areas. And in terms of revenue from April 2020 to March 2021, sales of just £46 billion, so a loss of revenue of £220 million a day, even at the times at which we were open. And it is worth remembering that it is only on the 19th of July, when we moved to step 4, that those businesses had an opportunity to move towards being cash positive. Inbound tourism, 73% lower, forecast to be sort of just 1/5 of the 2019 total for this year too. So and a much slower return to work as well, I think, is worth noting for Manchester hospitality businesses too. That impact on commuters, the delay and the sort of message from the government of being gradual return to work rather than a return to the office in June, inevitably pushes that back until September. So you are seeing a delay in our recovery until really September, when you can look at that runway. And I think it is worthwhile noting that while we did build momentum as we were coming out of lockdown in steps 2 and 3, there was quite a wobble over step 4. And I don't think we've really left the runway, if I can sort of mix my metaphors, really. Sort of the trajectory of upward increases, the building of confidence, really taken a bit of a hit. So a significant cooling effect on our sector nationally, but I think particularly acute in our city centre regions and major cities, where you've got the impact of a much slower return of commuters, business travel and events, and inbound starting much slower. So key issues and concerns as we emerge. First of all, the good news. Confidence is back up. It's at a 6-year high. It's had a little bit of a wobble, but I think as we go through the next couple of weeks, as we see cases continue to come down, as we see government messaging change around reopening again, we will see that confidence return. From a business confidence point of view, our sector in February 2020 was reporting 60% confident for the coming year. It dropped off a cliff to 5% in April. It was back up to 50% in February this year, and in May it hit the highest level for 6 years. So business confidence in hospitality higher than it was pre the Brexit vote. So our confidence levels haven't returned really before that. Business confidence rising, also consumer confidence rising, although there is that wobble around sort of May, June, July. Consumer confidence is 22 percentage points higher than it was when we started the unlocking. So a big increase in consumers being confident to return to venues, even with the Delta variant. There has been that sort of flattening off, and it's plateaued a little bit over the summer, but they are confident in returning to venues, and we've had about 70% of UK consumers returning to venues since the unlocking. For our business leaders, particularly looking at the sort of city centre ones, 3/4 optimistic for prospects for the longer term, but that's into next year. Only a quarter expect to return to profit this year, however. So we are looking at a sort of delay in the recovery, a quarter expecting to return to profit at the end of this year, a further third in the first half of next year, and the remainder projected to be end of 2022. So I think although we've got positive signs, green shoots, we aren't going to have a quick bounce back, and the bounce back perhaps that the government ministers might have been expecting is going to be much slower to emerge than perhaps they thought, and we need an adjustment from where we were this time last year, where we did think we were going to see that immediate bounce back. It's going to be a long, slow climb, and that long-term confidence offset by the significant short-term challenges. Staff shortages, supply chain disruption, hugely significant globally, but also you've got delayed effects of Suez, Brexit costs coming through, but the supply chain disruption from staff shortages, road haulier shortages, the pingdemic all hitting through, resulting in cost and wage rate inflation, which they've got to navigate for the next 3 months. So there are some immediate challenges that are coming through. So UK hospitality's next 6-month priorities, there is still a lot to do around reopening. So we can't sort of look ahead to sort of the future too quickly. There are sectors that are still clouded with uncertainty and where confidence is key. So we need the government to instill confidence that those sectors are open. We need a return to the messaging that says it's irreversible. We've had too much that is talking about potential restrictions coming back in September, closures coming back in, people assuming that restrictions means lockdowns. We need some clarity of messaging from the government around that. We understand it's very difficult with cases rising, but we need to have that messaging clear. The key 3 areas that we've talked about already: inbound tourism, great if we get that positive news this week, but we need to have, instead of sort of a yo-yoing of messaging around inbound tourism, we need to have clarity and certainty, and we need that roadmap for it coming back. And in particular, it's going to take time for that inbound tourism to return, and we need to be out in market collectively as UK PLC, and we need the government at a national level, regional level, local level to be putting money behind that. So my first and biggest plea was Patricia and her team need more funds to be getting out there, selling the message, getting international visitors coming back. New York is putting billions of pounds into a recovery campaign. This is not just a sort of, a one-off that's hitting the UK. Globally, our major competitors are also facing the same challenges. We need to be ahead of the curve there if we are going to get back to having it as our 3rd largest export earner, and we can't delay on that. Business events, we need to end the uncertainty around how they're reopening, what they're reopening with. There is still a lot of uncertainty around COVID status certification for that, and then the office return, obviously. And it clearly around the reopening, the pingdemic, we do need to have an evolved and workable self-isolation policy as we move forward out of this. Yes, it's good news that we might get the 16th of August and the double vaccinated or fully vaccinated, because it's not just enough to have fully vaccinated, but with 60% of hospitality's workforce under the age of 30 and a higher proportion of that in Greater Manchester, 16th of August is going to be meaningless for us, because through no fault of their own, those workers are not going to be able to be fully vaccinated by the 16th of August. So we need an evolved self-isolation policy for them. And then secondly, moving forward, it's about rebuilding resilience into the sector, rebuilding shattered balance sheets, particularly the burden of debt. The hospitality sector is going to emerge really heavily indebted from this crisis. Across the economy as a whole, corporate deposits are twice the level of corporate borrowings. It is exactly the opposite in hospitality. We are going to have about £10 billion of debt as we emerge from this crisis. Again, that's a key point from international competitiveness point of view. Our major competitor markets, Paris, Berlin, New York, all have had different levels of government support. Most of those loans have been converted into grants. They are not emerging with the same level of debt, so they can invest in their product, they can invest in their marketing far more quickly. So we do need to make sure that we support these businesses through the next 12 to 18 months. We've survived the black swan of COVID. We now have to have the grey rhinoceros of debt running alongside us for the next 12 to 18 months. These businesses will not be able to invest in anything while they pay down those debt levels. And we will see many fall over in that period unless we have support. So from a government strategy point of view, we have got the tourism recovery strategy, the hospitality recovery plan as well, two key government documents, cross-government documents. The tourism one in particular sets really big, ambitious targets that we will recover our international and our domestic tourism industry a year ahead of forecast. The DMO review that sits alongside that too, and the hospitality strategy as well, talks about rebuilding resilience in all of these areas. That is going to need to have some support sitting alongside it from government, and therefore we will be using the next 6 months to lobby quite considerably through the comprehensive spending review to make sure Visit Britain and all the DMOs get the funding that they need. But also crucially, looking ahead to budget 2022, we have a cliff edge of support there for our hospitality businesses. Everything falls away, business rates kick back in at the highest levels, set according to rents that were based on 2015, and VAT going up. Those are the two top priorities that our businesses tell us they need in order to rebuild financial resilience and also to tackle the staffing issues that they've got to. So that when we look at resilience in people, about half of our businesses have told us that they found staff shortages on reopening far greater challenge than expected, and one that's inhibited their ability to recover very quickly. 1 in 5 of our teams not returning from furlough. We need to give those businesses headroom. The best way to do it is to extend the lower rate of VAT for tourism services. That makes us competitive internationally. It means that we can boost domestic tourism because we give people a great British value for their holiday, but also it gives the businesses headroom to invest in their people. So we know we need to look at longer term structural issues. There are short-term absences and vacancies caused by the unwinding of furlough, caused by the pandemic. But longer term, we've set out a 12-point plan to work with the hoteliers, the hospitality businesses, to look at a major recruitment campaign to get people to think about hospitality as a career of choice, to position it as the best first job for that sort of generation of young people who've had 2 years disrupted training, and also to make sure that we've got the skills and training pipeline in place to reform our vocational training qualifications, make them fit for purpose, and make sure we get government funding so that the hospitality careers can be supported through the lifetime skills guarantee. Hospitality and tourism missing from the vocational training strategy, missing from the lifetime skills guarantee. If we're going to build back better, we need both of those things included. And then internally, we need to use this as a reset moment. So we look again at our terms and conditions of work to make sure that we are an attractive career, that we are supporting our people, that we are looking at personal development. And if we get all of those things right, if we have that government support, we deliver the tourism recovery plan, the hospitality strategy, we get support in the budget, then I'm sure that we will get back to doing what we do best. And next year will be a renaissance for not just Manchester, but the UK as a whole, picking up on those major events that Patricia talked about, but also delivering and coming back to getting back to 11% of employment, 7% of GDP, £10 billion worth of investment per annum in our high streets and town centres, showing and delivering on the value that we can make economically, culturally and socially here in Manchester, but also nationally and globally. Thank you.
Goodness, Kate, that was just jam-packed with stats and facts. So anyone who didn't quite get every stat and fact, we'll be recording this and sending a link to the webinar. Also, we'll send you the two strategies, the plans that Kate mentioned. So the National Tourism Recovery Strategy and the Hospitality Strategy, we can send them out in links afterwards. So if you didn't catch all of that, don't worry, you can get another bite. Okay, so introducing then to our third speaker, Joanne Roney, who is Chief Exec of Manchester City Council. So, all of the councils, as I mentioned before, across the land have had to deal with not only the vaccination programmes, dealing with the pandemic, implementation of all of the layers of the government grants, which have been great coming out from the tourism sector, which have been really good. So, and we'd just love to hear from you, Joanne, about going forward. So perhaps some of the challenges, but then going forward as to what your organisation is doing in terms of recovery. Over to you.
Yeah, hi, morning everybody. Good to see you all. I'm going to try and not kind of echo everything Kate has just set out, because I think Kate's just kind of really summarised where we're at. Let me try and put some Manchester specifics in there. So let me start with casting our minds back to COVID and the when it first broke, and just so people know that when we sat down in the council to plan our response to COVID, we myself and Sir Richard Lee sat down and said, how are we going to do this? And we set off three strands of work. One was around, obviously, impact on our people, community and health. So clearly we were dealing with a pandemic, so that was a strand of work. The second one was economic recovery, because we knew even then that a pandemic was going to have economic consequences for the city. We knew it wasn't going to be over and done within 6 weeks. We knew it was going to be long term. So we immediately started a strand of work around assessing impact on economy, working through how we would create forums with our businesses and have a theme of economic recovery running through our response. And the third one was the impact on us as a business. As you would expect, I still have to deliver services during a pandemic. And I also manage 7,700 staff and a turnover of 2 billion. So we had to work through what the impact on us was going to be. And I think we set off those three work strands as part of the response. And I think that's put us in a really good stead, because effectively, even though we didn't know what we were going to be dealing with, we did know that we were going to have to run response and recovery simultaneously. What that means is that we have throughout been tracking sector impacts and working with our partners throughout. So we didn't just do response, and now let's turn our minds to recovery. We've set these processes up in parallel. And it's been great, actually, to see our Manchester values that are writ through how we operate as partners in this city really come to the fore throughout the past 18 months, more than anything I've ever seen. Truly outstanding. Analysis, data, sharing of trends, joint working to understand impacts and present, I think, a very united front to government in terms of what are the impacts in Manchester, Greater Manchester, and how do we work with government to effectively respond and recover. What flowed from that was, from all of that work, was that November last year, we produced our economic recovery investment plan, which is about an £800 million ask of what we think it will take for each sector to recover. Now, this plan was put together by sector leads and businesses. It wasn't the council's plan. It was through these arrangements that we'd had. And you won't be surprised to know that in doing this work, the significance of culture, tourism, creative industries to this city is writ large in that plan, because it is in the DNA of this city, and Manchester has always supported culture, tourism, and, as I've said, creative industries. So in that plan, we identified what we needed to do to address many things that Kate has stated, really, in terms of the challenges. We recognise the significance of the sector, what we needed to do in terms of coming through the COVID by thinking the types of businesses we'd want to create in the future. So that's small micro businesses. What kind of small places can we create? What are we doing around digital connectivity? What are we doing around support for grassroots organisations and artists who have struggled incredibly throughout this pandemic? What can we do around those supply chains, as Kate recognised? How do we build them through Manchester and Greater Manchester, but also wider, particularly looking at digital content and music? And what can we do around talent retention, talent development, all of the workforce and skills issues? So we started that work. We've identified through businesses and through our networks the kind of investment and initiatives that we would need. And all of those ideas have started to feed through into what will be our levelling up proposals and asks and opportunities for the city as we go. And I'll say something more about that in a minute. But the first round of the levelling up proposals have led to work taking place with Home and the Arches to bring Arches back into use, but also the conversion of Upper and Lower Field, Campfield markets. So that's about saying the last year we have spent working through in detail the plans that we need in order to access the funding that is there to hit the ground running to make a difference. We also recognised that as well as thinking through longer term sustainability and growth of economic recovery in that sector, there was a real need to sustain the existing sector, particularly, as I said, Kate said, we call it the COVID okey cokey, with the restrictions that we were in and out and shaking them all about. What was happening with the sectors during that phase we led to us launching the Cultural Recovery Plan, which was all about stabilising the sector, recognising we needed to both stabilise as well as plan for recovery and onward success. And I would pick out a couple of highlights from that COVID recovery plan. One was the decision to proceed with MIF. That was a Manchester International Festival. That was the decision that had to be taken in the height of a pandemic, and to proceed and plan, but to completely recognising the international element may be more of a challenge. We would flip it to put a great deal more activity into outdoor spaces, community-based, but sustaining local artists and creating those supply chains. So, we've just we continued MIF, we've just done it. It was fantastic. It was an absolute, we were blessed with great weather in Manchester, which can only go to prove that the sun was shining on us because we're doing the right things here. But, it was a really great fortnight, exhausting, but amazing again. And of course, we've continued with the building of the factory, which will be, it's going to be an iconic and massively significant launch of that exhibition, event, performance space when it opens in the city. So we also clearly put additional support into the sector in terms of, let me kind of put some numbers out, £112 million worth of grant funding in the city. The council put in an additional 2 million funding for culture and entertainment, additional restrictions who were affected because, the national schemes, great as they were to sustain the sector, there were always people who fell between those traps, the self-employed, various other people. So we put additional capacity in ourselves. We also put a great deal of effort into business support, webinars, contacts, keeping those networks together. 9,000 organisations getting weekly newsletters, and that's not us, that's the colleagues such as Cityco and others, yourselves in Marketing Manchester, Shona, and many others through the Growth Company, keeping that network together, keeping that confidence, that connectivity to one another. Of course, we also did a range of promotion campaigns, particularly around outdoor use. And I think there was some significant noticeable changes that took place in the city. We granted over 400 outdoor licences for hospitality. So encouraging businesses to move from their traditional business patterns to outdoor events and outdoor seating and make that all COVID compliant. And, we did this without any major issues. I have to take my hats off to the sector, really, who responded so brilliantly in the most challenging and difficult times. So where are we now? Well, we have seen footfall increasing in the city. We're about 53% up on this time last year, not quite back to 2019 in city centres, but interestingly, footfall in district centres has gone up even more. And I think, you know, sometimes we absolutely quite rightly focus on the city centre, but we have seen an upsurge and confidence back in district centres as people. So there's less people in the city centre. They may be spending more in their local businesses and their local shops and their local leisure and hospitality, so that's quite good. We've seen leisure open and we're starting to see a return to leisure, and that's good. Clearly our major concern is, as Kate and Patricia has said, international travel is so significant for this city. I would say that's the area we have our greatest concern. And we've started to see a return to major events and conferences, although again not at the volume that we are used to in the city, but a slow increase. Interestingly, hoteliers report to me that they're actually seeing the hotel sector pretty much back to recovery, with the exception of the airport hotels, as we see more staycations and holidays in this country. That sort of weekend return into Manchester has started to increase. So we are seeing a gradual but slow, but nonetheless positive return to the city. We've also done a lot of thinking around how we support the sector moving forwards in terms of the workforce challenges that Kate mentioned. There have been real challenges, and it's not just hospitality sector. I think most noticeably the retail sector in the city has been very badly affected. So with colleagues in Greater Manchester, we've put a great deal of support in for skills and employment, and the retraining and the repurposing of buildings alongside the people who are in those sectors that have been sadly lost. So 243 people from Debenhams assisted back into new roles. Same for House of Fraser, and the proposals brought forward to repurpose those iconic buildings for the city. We've also put in the Cultural Recovery Fund, just so people know, that's 118 Manchester businesses access the Cultural Recovery Fund. That's £26 million of support that's gone in through that. And an additional, a Cultural Hardship Fund, which was grants to freelancers of around £1,500 to people. And that was all due to charitable donations, which again is very Manchester, isn't it, to draw on our partners and put proper support into the people who need it. So I think overall, we're now in a place where we've stabilised. We've started to see the green shoots of recovery. So it's kind of looking forward, really. What do we do moving forward? So I've said, firstly, it's capturing what we've learned through COVID. And I think some of that is the use of outdoor space. What are we going to do around the public realm and the transport in the city centre? And how do we repurpose some of our arrangements so that some of those outdoor events continue? So there's challenges with that. You know, sometimes we've closed roads, like in the Northern Quarter. There's consultation to take place on which of those road closures we keep. In other areas, we've kind of used part of the highways and repurposed part of high streets. More people into the city, that becomes incredibly difficult to do. So a big logistical planning exercise around future transport in the city and the placemaking, if I call it the placemaking agenda. But what has also changed is we're recognising attitudes have changed. So people do like the outdoor spaces. People do want to see a different street scene. So we are going to keep some of that in our long-term thinking. We have seen a reduction in traffic. What does that mean for our zero carbon ambitions? What can we do around repurposing the way the city works? I think we've also worked closely with our businesses in terms of feedback from businesses and return to work, and we are seeing that gradual return to work. We're probably moving up to that September before fully, as people have said. But interestingly, what we're getting from the return to work is different flexible work patterns, but also an increasing interest in leisure, in particularly walk-in meetings, trying to repurpose offices so it's collaboration space linked to more hospitality space. So I think there's been an attitude shift, which I actually think is quite a positive attitude shift, which I'll draw on really. And that's that I think people have appreciated culture, leisure, hospitality more. Maybe we needed to lose it to remind ourselves how much we loved it. So I think there is a resurgence of interest in wanting to build leisure, hospitality culture into people's personal and work lifestyles and getting that balance. So I think there's a pent-up demand there that extends far beyond just everybody desperate to get to a football match, but is really into thinking differently about how they access broader hospitality. I think the point around workforce is incredibly important to us. 53,000 employees in Manchester work in this sector. We need to make sure that we retain those jobs and we make those attractive jobs. We have lost a lot of international students to that market. I'll be keen to get them back, but really putting attention into the workforce side of rebuilding this element of our economy. I'm just going to end by saying pre-pandemic, the culture, hospitality, leisure sector was worth £9 billion to Greater Manchester, £5 billion to Manchester. So this is a significant sector in the city. We make no apologies for that. It matters to us incredibly. And we are very keen to not just see it recover, but to see the recovery build on those strengths, particularly the international and global. We know patterns have changed. I think there is a lot of reasons to be confident. The investment is continuing. We now need to work harder at the workforce. We work harder at the supply chains. We work harder to bring in the visitors that we've lost during the pandemic, but include more. We work harder to make sure we're connecting Manchester to the rest of the UK in a way that probably wasn't done. And my final point would be, I mentioned levelling up. Well, I'm pretty clear that levelling up for Manchester and for Greater Manchester has to have significant investment in culture, hospitality and leisure industries, have for significant investment in this sector moving forward, because it is so incredibly important to us, both economically, but also in our general well-being, the general health and well-being of our population. So you could not be more at the heart of everything we stand for in Manchester and continue to be so. I'm on the national group that meets weekly, discussing with government, cross-government impacts of COVID. And I can assure you that I champion this sector hugely, as I have done throughout the pandemic and will continue to do so, so that, as I've said, we don't just recover, but we go on from strength to strength. Thank you, Shona.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joanne. Goodness, I could almost cry there when you were saying that. You've been so supportive of our sector. So thank you very much for all of that, and especially because I think you just come off of leave and probably had a million things to deal with before this call this morning. There's a few questions coming in, so hopefully deal with them at the end. There's three in particular. One around, will there be investment from government for campaigns and in particular groups and incentives? So perhaps, Patricia, if you could pick that one up. One for UK support around the recruitment campaign. I noticed that in both the hospitality and the tourism recovery plans, that was a central part. I think we've all talked about the potential, but also the opportunity for putting the sector back on the map in terms of an appealing employment choice. And there was also a question, more local support for the local supply chain to recover. So perhaps, Joanne, you could pick up on that if you've got time. So last speaker, thanks for waiting so patiently, Victoria. Victoria's got some slides to show you, and it's going to talk about some of our recovery campaigns. So over to you, Victoria.
Thanks, Shona. So I'm going to take you through some of the work that Marketing Manchester have been doing throughout the pandemic to support the industry. I'll go on to talk in detail about campaign activity and what we've got coming up. But first of all, just to highlight our two-pronged approach to delivery, really. We've got the area which is all focused on stimulating demand and raising awareness. So that's all of our tactical work. And then aligned to that, we've got the long-term strategic development. So what I'm going to spend today talking about is all of the awareness raising and stimulating demand. So we've been delivering activity that motivates and inspires people to take action. So reminding people of all the great things that they can come and enjoy within the city. Boosting confidence by sharing content that reminds people that these spaces are safe places to go to, and there's a lot of work gone on to make sure that they have a safe and are welcomed into the environment. We're working every time the restrictions change, we've pivoted to make sure that we're talking to the audiences. So as transport advice changes, as overnight stays have changed, we've worked through every single part of the restrictions and will continue to. We've worked with our partners to make sure that we've got a compelling commercial offer. We're working to target corporate clients, which are hugely important, as the speakers have already mentioned, and engaging audiences through PR activity. Longer term, we need to work with Manchester Airport to support route development strategy. We basically need to go out and rebuild our route network. So we'll work with Manchester Airport to support that. Visit Britain, hugely important for us. The work that we've managed to achieve over the past 15 years in our global markets is because we've done this hand in hand with Visit Britain. We're the only DMO that's got a global partnership, and we're just looking at how we can rewrite that. And we're also focusing on levelling up for the North. We're working with the industry to make sure that we're recovering, but as Joanne said, preparing the foundations for growth. We have huge ambitions. We've got an airport that's just reopened that's got a massive amount of capacity. We want to get back to the ambitions that we had in 2019. Working with the travel trade, hugely important for us. We've maintained all of those relationships so that as soon as we get the green light that people can start to come from those destinations, the trade will help to drive those visits. Conference pipeline's huge, so looking at how we continue to attract those conferences and sports events that our team are bidding on for the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We're working on that pipeline as we speak. Universities, huge for us. Attracting international and national students, hugely important to make sure that we support our economy. So what have we been doing about this? This is an overview of our campaign portfolio. So while we still had restrictions, it was all about find your space and looking at how we could get people into the environment in any way that we could. So getting people out, making sure that our students were taking up their places, and then making sure that people were planning space to meet in the long term. And we worked on Summer in the City and Have a Night on Us, which are campaigns that are still running now. So Summer in the City, we were lucky enough to receive funding from Visit England to support this campaign as part of their overarching drive for domestic tourism. So this came under the Escape the Everyday campaign. We also came up with a great compelling offer with the Manchester Hoteliers Association, Have a Night on Us. So if you book 2 nights in Manchester, you got your 3rd night free. And the great thing about this was it was a pilot to get our bookable product onto TXGB, so that all of these hoteliers will be able to take advantage of future promotions that we're running, but also promotions that Visit England and Visit Britain will be booking. So all of that work on product development has been happening in the background. So some of the results to date. Our Summer in the City campaign has had 17 million digital impressions, which has generated 233,000 page views of our content. So this is generating people looking at what they can plan, what they can do, and actually making those bookings. The Cultural Recovery campaign that Joanne mentioned, we've had huge success with this, bringing together over 20 organisations supported by Manchester City Council, Arts Council and the GMCA. We've managed to deliver a collaborative campaign bringing all of those messages together. But more importantly, each organisation puts a small amount of funding in, we get a significant impact. So this is targeting audiences within GM, within an hour's drive of Manchester, cultural attenders, but also people that don't attend cultural events, to help them, to motivate them to take some of these experiences which are so important to health and well-being. To date, the campaign has had a huge impact, 35 million digital impressions, generating 262,000 plus views of our digital content. And this campaign will continue into September, and we'll also look to see how we can put bids into the next round of cultural recovery funding. So hugely important, and we'll be sharing a case study about how we've actually delivered that, because as usual, Manchester's leading the way in how we approach collaboration. Business visits and events, hugely important to the sector. So Steph and the team have been working on collaborating with Conference News. This is a really focused audience. So we want meeting planners that are looking at their schedules and that we want them to choose Manchester. So using our favourite little buzzy bee, Manchester's buzz is back. So we run an advertorial within within the Conference News, and then we also backed that up with business visits and events webinars, which took place within the new studio at Manchester Central. So this content will run throughout the Conference News hub, and some of those videos feature our very own Stephanie Newton as one of the industry experts. Content is also hugely important for this sector, so we've created a series of videos and virtual tours, and I'll just give you a quick snapshot of one of the videos. Lucy, if you can play the film for me, please. Great, thank you. So really important that we continue to engage our audiences through business visits and events. Reaching out to the media is also hugely important to make sure that our awareness raising is right up there, and that we're working with national and international publications. Our press and PR team have been writing compelling content such as the 21 Things to Do in Greater Manchester, which we've been sharing with media throughout Q1 and 2, which has already helped us to get coverage across lots of publications, reaching as many people as possible. We've also attended the International Media Marketplace in May, where we briefed over 30 journalists on what was new in tourism and hospitality and culture, and how our approach in Manchester was unique. We also created the Manchester Insiders Handbook, which was a briefing guide for journalists, which has got all of the updates on what's important within our sector. And we've already seen coverage from this guide in Condé Nast, in The Times, Harper's Bazaar, The Independent, Grazia, the list goes on. The work that the team are doing is being translated into these great media coverage. Throughout the quarter as well, we continue to engage with a media database of about 1,300 contacts that are hungry and are wanting to support our destination. They know that we're a great place and they want to write about us, but they need those updates and they need to know what's happening so they can create great content for their readers. We're feeding them stories all the time to make sure that they've got a story that they can write about Manchester. Moving on to hugely important workers. We know that workers are the lifeblood of cities and underpin the ecosystem across Manchester. Cities and towns recovery will help our industry. We've talked already about people enjoying more leisure. So what we want to do is run a campaign that will start at the end of August, aiming to get people into the office and back into the city centre in September. So we've pulled together a campaign that's there to support employers transitioning their workforce back into the workplace, promote the benefits of returning to the workplace, but not just the work benefits, benefits, all the associated leisure. You know, we're all creatures who need to interact with other people. So all the fun things around getting back in touch with your team and your colleagues, increasing confidence in safety levels, particularly in public transport, making sure that people know that there's a lot going on in the background to make sure that their commute's safe, and also looking at ways that we can promote modal shift, walking, cycling, anything that gets you into the office in a safe manner. So this campaign will run from August. We'll have a website that has loads of offers and information about things that you can do around your daily activity. And I'm just going to show you this short film, which gives you an idea of some of the types of ways that we'll be engaging people. So Lucy, if you could play this one for me too.
I'll tell you what, Manchester is buzzing this morning. It's so good to see people coming back into the city, isn't it? The city's really coming back to life now.
Thanks, Lucy. So we had real fun with that film. We made sure that it was probably a bit more Mancunian than we would usually go, but we want people to enjoy it and think about all those nice things about work. So I'm mindful of time, so I'll just skip through to, if you're not already involved, how can you get involved in our campaigns and partnership opportunities? If you contact Richard Sherwood, he'd be delighted to hear from you, and you can get involved in our campaign activity if you're not already. And I'll stop there. Whew.
Great, thanks Victoria. As always, loads going on, and please get in touch if you want to get involved with any of that. I'm really sorry, my bad chairing, we're out of time, but there's loads being jam-packed into that. We'll send you out the slides, but just really for those that are still, everybody's still on actually. So what I'd like to do is just say thank you so much to our speakers for giving up our time. The network and the ecosystem of this tourism hospitality is really strong with our partners here and speakers today. So thank you so much to Joanne, Patricia, Kate and Victoria for attending. We've got another event coming up, which is on the 23rd of September. So this was our postponed event. It was in June, but we've decided to take it into September. This is a face-to-face event in Manchester, and it's focused on careers, business and global. So we'll be leading the global element of that, looking at tourism hospitality as well as our other themes, innovation, digital and green. So, really look forward to see you then. All the questions, thank you for the questions. We will get back to each and every one of you with individual answers on those questions. And if you've got time before you drop off, please complete the poll for feedback and register for the Progress 21 it's in the chat with the registration link. Thanks so much. See you next time, everyone, and take care, and look forward to working with you again in partnership for this great recovery. Thanks, everyone.